It's warm outside this morning. I've got my certified crop scouts out in the field this morning. We're checking out a little bit of this corn and seeing how it's getting along. With weather like this, almost 70+ degrees, sun is shining, this corn is growing extremely quickly. The dogs have gotten distracted already with something going on in the ditch. Does not take them long. O'Malley's marking a spot. We're in between rain showers right now, waiting on the ground to dry off so we can do some replanting. We're gonna try and stay busy if that's even a possibility, as we're still in planting mode. We've got a small sweet corn patch that we like to plant. Other than that, we're gonna see what kind of trouble we can get in today. Like the video, let's get to work. As of right now, we were 100% planted on corn. If I had to put a number on it, I would say our corn is probably 60 to 65% emerged. After this week, it'll all be out of the ground. We have extremely warm weather. We had a wonderful rain over the weekend, 1.5 to 2 inches of rain that came very slowly. You cannot ask for much better moisture than that. The ground did not get packed down. We did not have any ponding or flooding. It was dry enough that it's all gone already. 2 inches of rain, typically, if the ground is a little more moist, would be very evident out here in the fields. However, it's mostly gone. Look at that. We have an absolutely phenomenal stand of corn out here on the first farm we planted. It's weathered the freezing cold conditions we had 2 weeks ago, and it's thriving right now in this 70, almost 80 degree weather. It took about 3+ weeks for us to get a full stand of corn out here. Some spots are still a little bit far behind. However, the field's in great shape. A corn plant from germination to emergence typically takes 100 to 120 growing degree days. Growing degree days are just a measurement of temperature and its effect on corn growth. Lower temperatures are less conducive for growth compared to higher temperatures. It's that simple. When it is extremely warm outside, corn plants can emerge in less than a week. However, oftentimes when we're planting corn in April with soil temperatures around the low 50 mark, it takes 2 to 3 weeks, as I mentioned before, for the crop to emerge. As you look behind me, you'll notice that there is a varying level of corn emergence out on this field. Everything is a little bit different in height at this moment. However, it'll catch up very quickly once it's out of the ground. The reason for that range of growing degree days for emergence from 100 to 120 degrees on average is that there is a massive amount of factors out in the field that affect plant growth. Soil conditions, moisture, hybrid, just to name a few, play a fundamental role in how fast the crop gets out of the ground. The portion of the field with darker soil conditions often emerge faster. The richer, darker soil reflects more sunlight and causes a warmer soil temperature in those areas, whereas the lighter areas seem to struggle a little bit to gain that same amount of temperature. Corn plants are just now entering the first stage of their vegetative growth. The cotyledon has unfolded. Every time another set of leaves comes out, they enter another stage of growth until they hit their reproductive cycle. We would call this V1 corn. We'll take a look at this guy. It's about 2 inches tall. See how it's developed. Pull it out of the ground. I ripped some of the roots. The corn plant is much quicker to put roots down earlier on in its life cycle. As the year goes on, corn has much higher water and nutrient requirements than soybeans. It knows what it needs, so it's putting down those roots to be able to get interactions with the soil to harness its requirements from growing. As you can see, the corn did not shed its seed coat. It's still attached there at the bottom of the plant. Let's put him back. He won't even be able to tell anything ever happened to him. Look at that. Good as new. Look at that. Maybe stand him up a little bit. There you go. Yeah, you can't even tell I pulled that one out of the ground. Just across the road, you can see our first field of soybeans starting to pop out of the ground. They have not unfolded their dicotyledons yet, so they haven't entered their trackable level of vegetative growth. Once these cotyledons unfold, we'll enter the V1 stage as they put on their first set of leaves. You can see that the spacing on our soybean plants is a little bit more sporadic than our corn plants. We're planting a lot more seeds. The accuracy of a soybean planter is not as important as the accuracy of a corn planter. These plants will all adapt very well to each other, and once they get larger, we'll canopy this ground out to prevent any other weeds from competing with them. That double there. That's called a double. The planter put down 2 seed beans at once. This is the current state of our soybean plants in the ground. As you can see, the dicotyledons are about to unfold. They've made decent root growth, and they're in excellent condition. We're going to put him back. There is the remainder of the seed coat and treatment that was on it that's protecting these seedlings. Although the growth of soybean plants is not based on the same growing degree factors that we use to chart corn, you can use growing degree days in the early stages of a soybean plant's life to have a general idea of how much progress is made. As we get further into the season, growing degree days become irrelevant to a soybean plant because everything they do is based on that sky ball right up there, somewhere up there. It's based on the sun. The way soybeans grow is purely based on the length of day. Growing degree days are irrelevant to them. However, they are a good basis to determine how fast they're going to pop out of the ground and what we can do with them early on. No decisions on soybeans are ever made by a growing degree day calculation. They are always made by scouting and being able to tell what stage of their reproductive cycle they're in. Soybean plants also take about 100 to 120 growing degree days from germination to emergence. Soybean plants, though, are much quicker to imbibe water and begin the germination process. A corn plant, like our seeds across the road here, take almost 5 to 6 days to complete the process of water imbibition and germination. Soybean plants are typically planted a little bit more shallow than corn, so they have less to overcome as they come out of the ground. As we approach the heart of the growing season, this will be a good time for me to explain to you a little bit more technical understanding of growing degree days, how they function, what they do, and how they affect our corn plants. Let me go do that real quick. That way you guys know as we go through the season what we're talking about, because we will mention growing degree days a significant amount of times. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about growing degree units, or GDUs as they're commonly abbreviated and referred to in the industry. GDUs are a measurement of heat accumulation that can be used by farmers, gardeners, and plant enthusiasts alike to predict individual plant species growth based on ambient temperatures within their respective regions. Many crops, such as corn, grow in a cumulative linear manner that is not dependent on year. Cumulative calculations of growing degree units will allow for farmers to predict where the corn crop is in its life cycle. Although environmental factors do play a very important role in the plant's development in its local region, a majority of its growth is determined by its ability to accumulate heat. The calculation of these heat units allow for farmers to determine, independent of year, where the crop is in its life cycle. Yearly differences in temperature cause very different conditions for their corn crop. GDUs can be a very important tool for farmers to be able to determine when they should apply fertilizers, insecticides, and other pesticides to their field for optimal performance. A GDU is calculated by taking the temperature maximum plus the temperature minimum divided by 2, and that total quantity is subtracted by 50. The temperature maximum and temperature minimum are determined by the average local temperatures in the area. The thresholds of these temperatures are based solely on the crop. A corn's temperature maximum and temperature minimum are not the same as another crop that grows in a similar manner. The temperature at which corn is at its maximum growth efficiency is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Any higher in its ability to accumulate GDUs does not increase. If anything, it actually becomes more inefficient as water demand is greatly increased. The minimum temperature for corn to grow is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything below that temperature and there is zero growth for a corn plant. Knowing that these are the maximum and minimum temperatures for corn, the theoretical GDU accumulation range for one day is between 0 and 36 GDUs. 0 would be assuming that the maximum and minimum temperatures are both below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and 36 would be assuming that the temperature maximum and minimum are at least 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which is highly unlikely. Accumulating 36 growing degree units in one day would be a great feat for our region. The temperature maximum for a corn plant is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. If the high ambient temperature for the day is above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, let's say 90 degrees for instance, the maximum temperature you can use is 86 degrees Fahrenheit in the formula. Likewise, the minimum temperature is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature low dips below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest number you can use is 50 degrees. I'm going to show you a few practical examples on how we calculate GDUs and accumulate them on a daily basis. Let's say on Monday, the high is 90 degrees Fahrenheit and the low is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. On Tuesday, the high is 60 degrees Fahrenheit and the low is 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And on Wednesday, the high is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and the low is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. On a daily basis, we go in and calculate GDUs in order to find the total accumulation for those 3 days. On Monday, because the high is 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the highest temperature we can use is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. We take 86 degrees plus 75 degrees divided by 2 subtracted by 50. That results in a growing degree day accumulation of 30 and a half. On Tuesday,
we take 60 degrees plus 55 degrees divided by 2 and subtract 50. That results in 7.5 growing degree days accumulated. On Wednesday, we take 50 degrees as our maximum temperature, and we use 50 degrees as our minimum temperature because the low on this day is below our threshold amount. We divide those by 2, and we subtract 50, resulting in 0 growing degrees accumulated on that given day, meaning that the crop did not grow at all. The total GDUs accumulated for these 3 days combined is 38. That is 38 growing degree units accumulated towards our total growth in our life cycle. In a corn plant, this is a very minuscule amount. Over this 3-day period, 38 growing degree units sounds like a large quantity. However, when you consider that hybrids in our area typically take 2,600 plus growing degree units to reach physiological maturity, that is a drop in the bucket compared to what we need over those next few months in order for that crop to mature and go through its life cycle. Although 38 growing degree units may sound like a large quantity of heat accumulated, it is actually a very small amount in the scheme of things. The hybrids that we plant typically take 2,600 growing degree units to reach physiological maturity. They usually take about half of that, so 1,300 or so growing degree units to start their reproductive processes. That would be the beginning of R1, as the stage would be called, or the first silk on the corn plant. As we approach warmer weather, this corn crop's ability to accumulate growing degree units will rapidly accelerate. We will quickly be into the hundreds and into the thousands as time goes on. Growing degree units are not a microscopic measurement of plant growth. Nothing is going to replace going out and scouting your crop to be able to tell where it specifically is in its life cycle. However, it is a great way for farmers to roughly estimate where their crop is and time their decisions accordingly. I hope this explanation shows you a little bit more about growing degree units and how they're calculated. Here is an automatic growing degree unit calculation off of Pioneer's website. This is calculated using the planting date and the location of our first field of corn that we've been checking in on for the last few weeks. As you can see in the top left corner, it has accumulated 234 growing degree units to date versus the trend of 273, so it's 39 below normal on an average year. If you look on this top chart, you can see that our planting date is the green line, the lighter blue line is the current date, and then our horizontal lines are significant events in the plant's life cycle. The lower turquoise line is the silking event, and the higher blue line is when it reaches black layer being physiological maturity for the plant. There's a few comparative lines on the top graph to show you where we're at this year versus years past. The bottom chart also shows you another perspective on how much we've completed versus our standard GDUs for the year.
We're making preparations to plant our second corn crop. No, it's not field corn, it's sweet corn. We're gonna go borrow a small little 4-row planter from one of our neighbors over the west that we're good friends with and get this corn crop in the ground. People love sweet corn. The 6430 is a nice little utility tractor, but it's the squirreliest thing. An absolute bolt down the road. We're going almost 30 miles an hour, and it's just not made to do this. Tractors this small with this narrow of a wheelbase should not be capable of these road speeds. So zipping along here. We've just secured the package. Time to head home. Kevin's a real sweet corn aficionado, and so is Marty. Got some field corn there. We're trying to decide where to start this. Corn spiking through. This is Dad's hobby project out in our small garden. He plugs 4-row units when he planted the regular commercial corn out here. That way he can come back in and put the sweet corn right along the edge of the field here. Dry enough out here in the works ground to do something like this. Got a storm moving in this evening. Here's where the planter started. You can tell the row units picked up right along here. We like to plant half the strip at one date and then wait a couple weeks later and plant the other half. That way there's a difference between the maturities of the seed corn. We're not planting 2 different day lengths of seed corn. So as opposed to planting it all at once and all being ready at once, we stagger it. That way we can enjoy sweet corn for a longer period of time. Once the corn's mature, you have about 2 weeks tops to enjoy the corn at its prime sweetness without it getting too hard. After 2 weeks, the corn gets kind of hard. Dad's going until he's empty. Then we'll come back in later and plant the rest of the way. gonna mark it just to be safe. Very clear line in the field. Well, if you can't tell, we had a little bit more rain. 2 inches of rainfall last night, compounded on the moisture from the 2 inches we had over the weekend, resulting in some excess moisture out in our fields. A little bit of ponding. You can see the water's coming off the surface on this specific farm, just to the south of our main farm, pretty quickly. However, it may still do some damage. This is exactly what I mean when I say we're done planting corn and most of our soybeans the first time. More often than not, we deal with water issues such as this. A majority of what is underwater right now will survive. However, portions of it will most likely not make it to the end of the week. When it dries up, we'll be out on farms with problems like this and other farms in the area that need replanted. That way we don't have bare ground out there. We're just now getting into May, so we still have plenty of time to replant crops. We've replanted corn as late as June. On the bright side, the temperature is not that high right now. When the ambient temperature is higher, crops underwater tend to die quicker than what they do when it's cooler outside. Warm temperatures are conducive to interactions in the water and in the plants to basically cause them to suffocate. The water's getting off of there pretty quickly. My absolute favorite part of all of these massive rainfalls we get is walking out to these fields to clean the tile inlets. The boots seem to get heavier with every step. Oh, good farm ground. Don't fall. We have some whitecaps out here. You can see that as the water flows in, these inlet covers on top accumulate plant matter, chaff, residue, whatever you want to call it. Water entering the tile right there, slowly draining this pond. We definitely could have gone without this rainfall, that's for sure. We were fortunate we didn't get near as much rain as some areas did in central Illinois. However, this still is going to have a minor impact on our crop. We're not even in May yet, so we have to replant. Not too worried about it. That was a good workout. Headed out to clean another one. This one's a little ways out in the field. It might take me about 5 minutes or so to walk out here. At least I have a tailwind. A very strong one at that, if you cannot tell from the audio, the movement of the water. There's always creative ways to get exercise on the water. Gosh. This one actually crosses over on the property line to my grandpa on the east side of this farm. Pretty deep out there. I would say we're going to have to do some replanting. Oh, we got some waves. You can see where the tile line is running, it's bubbling all the way out as it heads to the road. If the water was much deeper, I'd probably have to have the waders on. Oh my gosh! It's so windy that these waves are putting this water over my boots. That is freezing cold. I probably should have broke out the waders. Woo. Just out of shape. This is the first time we've done this year. Probably won't be the last. If you could imagine, given how wet 2019 was on our farm and most farms in Illinois, we've done this a lot. That's a long enough project that Dad dropped me off. He went to another farm to work on it while I walked down and back to check that inlet. Here he comes as we speak. We've been rained out of the field for a little over a week now. We still have that last small chunk of soybeans that we're trying to get in last Wednesday before we had the hydraulic line break in our planter and before all this rainfall came in. Since then, the equation shifted a little bit. We thought that we'd be putting the planter away and hopefully be done with them for the rest of the year. However, this 4 inches of rain we've gotten over the past week has kind of changed our outlook on this season so far. We've got to wait and see what our corn and soybean seedlings do. We may have to go back out there at some point and replant them. They're still so young that it's challenging to determine whether or not they're going to need replanting. When the plants are as small as they are now, it can be difficult to tell whether their emergence is just delayed or if they've just died off completely. The last thing we want to go do in corn especially is go out there and replant more seeds when there's still viable seed in the ground. Hopefully we'll know in the next few weeks whether or not we'll be replanting. We've got the corn planter all greased up. It'll probably see some action. They're calling for more rain this weekend, so hopefully in the next week or so, it'll dry off. There's gonna be 80-degree weather tomorrow. That is gonna have most of this ground behind me here grayed off. The 2 or 3 fields we have left to plant are just in the vicinity of the farm over here to the northeast. We'll get those planted. We'll probably empty the planter out again and start making considerations for how we're gonna replant the spots where our soybeans are dead. We're extremely far ahead of schedule. Last year at this time, we had not planted a single corn or soybean field. This year we're almost 99% planted. We're gonna have to do a little bit of replanting, I would imagine. However, that's normal. Every year there's a different set of challenges, and our replant corn usually does not struggle with yield unless it faces adverse conditions later on in the year. Things are kind of slow when it rains. We're still in planting mode. We're gonna be switching over into nitrogen mode. Our corn crop is gonna start getting hungry, and we wanna make sure it has plenty of the building blocks it needs. It is extremely nitrogen hungry. We'll be hooking on to a 32 bar, side dressing a lot of our fields. We may not get to that next week, maybe a couple weeks after. I hope you guys learned a little bit more today about growing degree days and how they influence the growth of our crops out in the fields. We will use that to track the progress of our corn plants and be able to tell where they're at in their vegetative and reproductive life cycle as the year goes on. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment if you have any questions. Have a great day. Peace!